The Real Scream, the chilling true crime story of the Gainesville Ripper and Ghostface. Act 1, the night Kevin Williamson kept the lights on. The night that changed Hollywood forever did not begin in a writer's room. It began in a dark, unfamiliar living room in Los Angeles in 1994. Screenwriter Kevin Williamson was house-sitting for a friend. Outside, the wind rattled the glass panes. Inside, the house was hollow and quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every floorboard creak a little louder than it should. To pass the time, Williamson turned on the television, flipping through channels until he landed on a late-night news documentary. The program was profiling a string of murders that had occurred 4 years earlier in a sleepy college town called Gainesville, Florida. As Williamson watched, the reporter described how a nameless shadow had slipped through unlocked apartment windows, stalked young college students, and paralyzed an entire community. The killer hadn't just taken lives. He had transformed ordinary, safe student housing into a theater of psychological terror. Williamson felt a sudden, cold prickle of sweat on the back of his neck. He looked across the living room and noticed, for the first time, that one of the large windows facing the dark backyard was unlatched. It was cracked open just a few inches, letting in the cool night air. A wave of intense, irrational paranoia washed over him. What if someone is out there right now? What if someone is watching me through the glass? Moving quickly, Williamson walked over to the kitchen, grabbed a heavy butcher knife from the wooden block, and dialed a close friend on his cell phone. "Hey," Williamson whispered, his voice trembling as he gripped the knife. "I'm staying at this house. A window was open. I'm freaked out. Stay on the line with me while I check the rooms." His friend laughed. "Oh, come on, Kevin. You're fine. What are you going to do? Look under the bed? What if you hear a voice on the line?" That single, terrifying conversation, a man holding a knife, talking to a friend on a phone, terrified of a shadow outside an open window, became the creative spark. Williamson sat down at a desk that very night and began typing a screenplay originally titled Scary Movie, which the world would later know as Scream. While the movie became a glossy, self-aware Hollywood masterpiece filled with witty dialogue and high school drama, the real story that inspired it was devoid of glamour. It was a grim, calculated descent into madness carried out by a man named Danny Rowling. And to truly understand why an entire generation became afraid to answer the telephone, we have to travel back to August of 1990, to a town called Gainesville, where summer was winding down and a nightmare was about to begin. Act 2, the making of the Ripper. To understand the monster that arrived in Florida in the summer of 1990, you have to look at the cracked foundation of his life. Danny Rowling was not born a ghost. He was forged in a furnace of domestic violence. Born in Shreveport, Louisiana in 1954, Danny grew up under the iron fist of his father, James Rowling. James was a local police officer, a man sworn to uphold the law by day, but who ruled his household with sadistic cruelty by night. For decades, James brutally beat Danny, his brother Kevin, and their mother. He subjected them to intense psychological torment, constantly telling Danny that he was worthless, a failure, a parasite who would never amount to anything. As Danny grew into adolescence, the psychological damage began to manifest in dark, quiet ways. He became a voyeur. He found a strange, addictive sense of control in slipping through the shadows of Shreveport, crouching beneath the windows of neighborhood homes, and watching women through the glass without their knowledge. In the dark, looking in, Danny Rowling felt powerful, a feeling his father had stripped away from him every single day of his life. He tried to escape his reality by joining the Air Force, but his psychological instability quickly caught up with him. He was dishonorably discharged for drug use and behavioral issues. He tried to get married, but his dark impulses and erratic temper caused the marriage to implode. With no anchor, Rowling turned to a life of crime. He began robbing grocery stores across the South, using his father's old police tactics to scout locations and map out escape routes. But the petty thefts were merely a cover for a boiling, internal rage. In November 1989, the rage finally spilled over. In his hometown of Shreveport, Rowling broke into a house belonging to the Grissom family. Inside, he encountered 24-year-old Julie Grissom, her 8-year-old son Sean, and her father Tom. Armed with a hunting knife, Rowling murdered all three. It was during this triple homicide that Rowling developed a chilling ritual. After taking Julie Grissom's life, he carefully washed her body in the bathtub, cleaned the crime scene to remove physical evidence, and posed her torso in a highly specific, theatrical position before slipping out into the night. The Shreveport police were baffled. They had no suspects, no DNA profile, and no idea that a serial killer had just tested his claws. By May 1990, the tension inside the Rowling household reached a fatal tipping point. Danny returned to his parents' home, where a violent argument erupted with his father. Decades of abuse culminated in a flash of gunfire. Danny pulled a pistol and shot his father twice, once in the stomach and once directly in the face. James Rowling miraculously survived the shooting, but he lost his left eye and his jaw was shattered. Danny Rowling was now a fugitive on the run for attempted murder and suspected of a triple homicide. He packed a duffel bag with a tent, a sleeping bag, a military-grade Ka-Bar hunting knife, and a screwdriver. He boarded a bus and headed southeast, deep into the state of Florida. He was looking for a place where he could disappear into a crowd. He found it in Gainesville. Act 3, The Campus Shadow. Gainesville in August 1990 was vibrating with energy. The hot summer air was thick, and the streets were jammed with thousands of young men and women returning to the University of Florida for the fall semester. For most students, it was a time of absolute freedom, their first time living away from home, renting apartments with friends, and leaving their doors unlocked because Gainesville felt like an extended, safe sanctuary. Danny Rowling arrived unnoticed. He didn't rent an apartment, he didn't register under a name. Instead, he hiked deep into the dense, humid woods just a few hundred yards behind the university campus. There, hidden beneath the thick canopy of trees and palmetto bushes, he pitched a small green tent. Living like a ghost in the woods, Rowling began to stalk the town. He bought a bicycle and rode through the maze of student apartment complexes neighboring the university. He reverted to his childhood habit, transforming into a professional voyeur. He spent hours prowling past the ground floor windows of the complexes, looking for specific layouts, evaluating the security of sliding glass doors, and watching the routines of the young women who lived inside. He wasn't looking for a quick mugging or a random assault. Rowling was looking to build a legacy. He later confessed that he felt a deep, twisted jealousy toward these college students. They had bright futures, loving families, and a world of opportunities, everything his abusive father had told him he would never possess. He decided that if he couldn't be a part of their world, he would become the entity that destroyed it. His first target was a modest apartment on SW 16th Avenue, shared by two fresh-faced freshmen who had just moved to town, 18-year-old Sonia Larson and 17-year-old Christina Powell. They were best friends, excited to start their college journey together. On the night of August 24, 1990, the humidity was stifling. Rowling parked his bicycle in the shadows outside their complex. He walked to the back of the building, pulled a heavy screwdriver from his pocket, and silently pried open the lock of the sliding glass door. He stepped inside. The apartment was completely dark, save for the faint glow of the streetlights outside. The only sound was the steady hum of the air conditioning unit. Rowling slipped off his shoes, holding his Ka-Bar hunting knife in his right hand. He walked down the short hallway, listening for the soft sound of breathing. Act 4, 4 Days of Terror. What happened inside that apartment over the next few hours would set the template for a wave of panic that would grip the entire state of Florida. Rowling walked into the first bedroom, where Sonia Larson lay fast asleep. Before she could fully wake up or realize a stranger was standing over her bed, Rowling lunged. He shoved a thick piece of silver duct tape over her mouth to stifle her screams, pinning her down with his weight. With cold, mechanical precision, he stabbed her multiple times, ending her life in a matter of minutes. As he stood in the quiet room, the floorboards creaked. In the adjacent bedroom, Christina Powell woke up. She called out her friend's name into the dark. Hearing her voice, Rowling stepped back into the hallway. When Christina opened her door to check the noise, she was met by a massive, shadowed figure holding a blood-stained knife. Rowling overpowered her, dragging her back into her room. He bound her wrists and ankles with duct tape. For hours, he subjected her to psychological torture and assault before ultimately taking her life. But it was what Rowling did after the murders that truly horrified investigators. He did not run. Instead, he spent over an hour meticulously staging the crime scene. He arranged Christina's body in a highly specific, shocking position facing the bedroom door, ensuring that whoever discovered her would experience maximum psychological trauma. He then took a washcloth and carefully wiped down the surfaces he had touched, erasing any trace of his existence. He slipped out through the sliding door, mounted his bicycle, and rode back to his tent in the woods to sleep. The bodies of Sonia and Christina were discovered 2 days later when family members, unable to reach the girls by phone, asked the apartment manager to check on them. The first responding officers walked out of the apartment visibly pale, shaking. Word of a double homicide leaked instantly, but before the local police could even establish a task force, Rowling struck again. On the night of August 25, just 24 hours after his first attack, Rowling targeted a small, standalone duplex on SW 24th Avenue. It was rented by 18-year-old Krista Hoyt. Krista was a brilliant student who also worked part-time as a civilian dispatcher for the Alachua County Sheriff's Office. She was trained to handle emergencies, to be alert, to look out for danger, but she had no way of anticipating the man waiting in the dark. Rowling broke into her home while she was out. He sat down in a chair in the pitch-black living room and simply waited. When Krista unlocked her front door and stepped inside after her shift, Rowling ambushed her from behind, placing her in a powerful chokehold before she could scream. He bound her with duct tape and took her life with the same chilling brutality he had used the night before. But the staging of Krista Hoyt's body was even more grotesque. Rowling decapitated her, placing her head carefully on a bedroom bookshelf, positioned so that it was looking directly at the doorway. The next morning, when Krista failed to show up for her shift at the police station, her worried colleagues drove to her duplex. When they forced the door open, they walked straight into a waking nightmare. The realization hit the Alachua County Sheriff's Office like a physical blow. They weren't dealing with a robbery gone wrong. A serial killer was operating in their backyard, and he was picking them off one by one. Act 5, the town that locked its doors. By Monday, August 27, the news broke across the nation. The headlines screamed a terrifying moniker, the Gainesville Ripper. The effect on the town of Gainesville was instantaneous and absolute. A dark, heavy cloud of terror settled over the community. The University of Florida, usually bustling with vibrant student life, transformed into a ghost town overnight. The carefree atmosphere of college life evaporated, replaced by an obsessive, survivalist paranoia. Thousands of students didn't wait to see if the police would catch the killer. Within 48 hours of Krista Hoyt's discovery, an estimated 10,000 students packed whatever they could fit into suitcases, loaded up their cars, and fled the city in massive, bumper-to-bumper convoys heading back to their hometowns. The university administration suspended classes, and the campus dormitories emptied out. For the students who chose to stay or who couldn't afford to leave, life became an exercise in extreme security. People refused to sleep alone. Unrelated students banded together, moving into single apartments to form makeshift fortresses. Groups of 5 or 6 would take turns staying awake in shifts throughout the night, armed with baseball bats, golf clubs, and kitchen knives, watching the windows. Local businesses saw their inventories wiped out within hours. Hardware stores sold out of every deadbolt, window latch, and padlock in the city. Gun shops had lines stretching out into the parking lots as young co-eds bought pistols and ammunition. Even local grocery stores sold out of air horns and mace. The telephone lines in Gainesville were jammed. Parents from across the country called their children every hour, demanding to hear their voices, making sure they were safe inside. Every time a phone rang in an apartment, it caused a jolt of pure panic. And yet, despite the massive police presence, despite the spotlights and the helicopters circling overhead, Danny Rowling was not finished. On the afternoon of August 27, as the town was actively locking itself down, Rowling targeted one final location, an apartment complex on SW 20th Avenue. The apartment was shared by 23-year-old Tracy Pauls and her lifelong friend, 23-year-old Manuel "Manny" Taboada. Manny was a muscular, athletic young man, a former high school football player who was known for his protective nature. Rowling pried open the door and stepped inside. This time, however, his intrusion didn't go smoothly. As Rowling crept toward the bedrooms, Manny Taboada woke up. Realizing someone was in the apartment, Manny didn't cower. He lunged out of bed and fought back with incredible ferocity. The struggle was violent and loud. Manny managed to land several blows, but Rowling, fueled by adrenaline and wielding his heavy hunting knife, ultimately overpowered and killed him. The noise of the struggle alerted Tracy Pauls in the next room. She tried to barricade her door, but Rowling kicked it open, terminating her life before staging the scene a final time and vanishing back into the afternoon heat. 5 students, 4 days. A major American university completely brought to its knees by a single, unseen phantom. Act 6, The Wrong Man and the Right Clue. The pressure on local law enforcement was unprecedented. The governor of Florida dispatched state investigators, FBI profilers, and hundreds of state troopers to patrol the streets of Gainesville. The police were desperate for a suspect, any suspect, to calm the raging public hysteria. In their haste, they locked their sights on the wrong man. His name was Edward Humphrey. He was an 18-year-old freshman at the University of Florida who lived in the same neighborhood as several of the victims. Humphrey had a history of severe mental health struggles, including bipolar disorder, and had recently stopped taking his medication, leading to erratic, aggressive behavior in public. Crucially, Humphrey had a series of distinct scars on his face from a previous car accident. To a desperate task force and a ravenous media, Edward Humphrey looked the part of a movie monster. On August 30, just days after the final murders, Humphrey was arrested on an unrelated charge of assaulting his grandmother. The police publicly identified him as the prime suspect in the Gainesville Ripper murders. His mugshot was plastered across the front page of every major newspaper in America and broadcast on national television networks. The media painted him as a deeply disturbed, calculated mastermind. The public let out a collective sigh of relief, believing the nightmare was over. But behind closed doors, forensic investigators were running into a massive problem. Edward Humphrey's DNA did not match the biological evidence left at the crime scenes. There were no tool marks connecting him to the pried doors, and his physical build didn't match the profile of the highly controlled killer who had cleanly executed 5 people. While the media continued to crucify Edward Humphrey, the real killer was caught entirely by accident, miles away from Gainesville. On September 7, 1990, less than 2 weeks after the murder of Tracy Pauls and Manny Taboada, a lone man walked into a grocery store in Ocala, Florida, about 40 miles south of Gainesville. He pulled a gun on the cashier, demanded all the cash in the register, and fled into the parking lot. Local Ocala police responded within minutes. A high-speed chase ensued, ending when the suspect crashed his vehicle into a ditch and attempted to flee into the brush on foot. Officers tackled him into the dirt, clicking handcuffs around his wrists. The man identified himself as Michael Kennedy Jr., but when police ran his fingerprints through the national database, the system flagged his true identity: Danny Lee Rowling, a dangerous fugitive wanted for the shooting of his father in Louisiana. Rowling was thrown into a high-security jail cell in Marion County for the armed robbery. At first, no one connected the soft-spoken, polite man from Louisiana to the horrific butcheries in Gainesville. But a sharp-eyed investigator in Ocala noticed something unusual in the trunk of Rowling's car: a heavy screwdriver and a military-grade car-bar hunting knife. The items were sent to the forensic lab. Technicians carefully compared the microscopic scratches on the screwdriver to the tool marks left on the prying points of the sliding glass doors in Sonia Larson's apartment. It was a perfect match. The task force immediately shifted their focus. They executed a search warrant on the wooded area behind the University of Florida campus where Rowling had been camping. Deep in the brush, they found his green tent. Inside, wrapped in a plastic tarp, was a video camera. When investigators played the tape, they didn't see footage of a mastermind. They saw a deeply unhinged man staring into the lens, playing an acoustic guitar, singing haunting country songs about being a damned soul, and openly talking about a dark alter ego he called Yancey. The final nail in the coffin arrived months later, when advanced DNA testing definitively linked Danny Rowling's blood to the biological material discovered at the Gainesville crime scenes. Edward Humphrey was officially exonerated, though the psychological scars of being publicly branded a serial killer would linger for the rest of his life. Act 7, the final verdict. The trial of Danny Rowling did not happen quickly. For nearly 4 years, his defense attorneys filed motions, attempting to argue that his severe childhood abuse had caused a psychological break, fracturing his mind into multiple personalities. But on February 15, 1994, the very same year Kevin Williamson would sit down to write Scream, the legal circus came to an abrupt halt. As the jury selection process was underway, Danny Rowling stood up in the courtroom and stunned everyone, including his own legal team. He pleaded guilty to all 5 counts of first-degree murder, as well as multiple counts of sexual battery and armed burglary. Rowling later confessed that he didn't want a long, drawn-out trial where his father's abuse would be the main focus. In his twisted mind, he wanted to retain control. He admitted that his primary motivation for the murders wasn't sexual satisfaction or financial gain. It was a desire for fame. He openly stated that he wanted to become a superstar among criminals, explicitly citing Ted Bundy as his idol. He wanted the world to look at him and feel the exact same terror that he had felt as a little boy staring up at his abusive father. During the penalty phase of the trial, the families of the 5 victims finally had their chance to speak. They described the bright futures that had been permanently extinguished in those 4 days in August. They spoke of the empty chairs at Thanksgiving, the graduation gowns that would never be worn, and the permanent shadow of fear that had been cast over their lives. The judge was unmoved by Rowling's attempts at poetic remorse or the songs he tried to sing in his cell. On April 20, 1994, Danny Rowling was sentenced to death. He spent the next 12 years on death row at Florida State Prison. On October 25, 2006, the journey that had begun in a broken home in Louisiana came to its final stop. Rowling was strapped to a gurney in the execution chamber. When asked if he had any final words, he refused to speak to the witnesses or the families watching behind the glass. Instead, he began to chant a strange, monotone religious song he had written himself. At 6:00 p.m., the lethal chemicals began to flow into his veins. At 6:13 p.m., Danny Rowling was pronounced dead. Act 8, the echo in the theater. The horror of Gainesville eventually faded from the daily headlines, but it transformed American culture in ways that are still visible today. Before 1990, college campuses were viewed as pristine, untouchable bubbles where the dangers of the outside world couldn't penetrate. The Gainesville Ripper shattered that illusion forever. Universities across the country completely overhauled their security protocols, installing thousands of campus security cameras, emergency blue light phones, and strict keycard access to dormitories. The era of the unlocked college apartment was officially over. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of Danny Rowling's crimes is the way we process fear through entertainment. When Kevin Williamson transformed his real-life night of paranoia into the script for Scream, he tapped into a very real, universal trauma. When audiences sat in movie theaters in December 1996 and watched the opening sequence, where a phone rings in an empty house, a voice asks a terrifying question, and a shadow slips through an unlatched window, they weren't just watching a clever horror movie. They were experiencing a highly stylized version of the exact sequence of events that had paralyzed a town in Florida 6 years prior. The fictional Ghostface character became a pop culture icon, famous for his mask, his dark humor, and his cinematic survival. But the true story behind the mask serves as a stark, chilling reminder that real monsters do not wear Halloween costumes. They do not deliver witty one-liners before they strike. and they cannot be defeated by a clever twist in a script. Real monsters are born in the quiet corners of broken homes. They live in tents hidden in the woods just outside our windows, and their stories leave a trail of real grief, real loss, and an echo of fear that lingers long after the credits roll and the theater lights come up. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave your comment down below what you thought. Have you heard about this one? Tell me what you thought. Thanks for watching.